everybody? This is Chip Baker coming to you with another episode of the Success Chronicles, and we have Ahmard Vital with us today, and great man. The first question we have on our deal is, how we know each other, how we met, and I can talk about that. Last week he came and spoke to our athletes here at Oak Ridge High School, and it was amazing. I mean, from start to finish, it was, the kids truly enjoyed it, and the standing ovation probably lasted about 10 minutes, huh?
It did go for quite some time.
But our kids were very appreciative, and as well as us coaches, and we thank you for doing that, and I also thank you for stopping by interviewing with us for the success story, because the story that you have is a pretty good one.
Thank you.
So let's just dig into that. If you could just kind of tell us your life story. Where you're from, how it was growing up, where you all were, and some things that I heard you talk about when you spoke to our guys. I thought that was pretty interesting. So maybe try to mention some of those things about your college and all of that stuff as well.
Well, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, to one of the first black petroleum engineers, which was my biological father, and my mother, who is a school teacher now for over 30 years. Obviously, so both coming from a college-educated background. We moved to Texas by the time I was 2. And for the most part, it was one of those situations where, living a pretty middle-class type of life for the most part. But it was always one of those situations where my father and mother didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. So, I was always kind of caught in the middle of that, because the fact is that being a petroleum engineer and, kind of operating it the way he decided to operate, so it was a lot of detachment. Mm-hmm. So that obviously caused a rift. I think by the time I was 11 or 12, my parents had officially split up. Maybe even was earlier than that. Mm-hmm. And so I was raised by a man named Ahmard Vital, which is the name I carry today, who's also college educated. He was an art teacher at Texas Southern, former coach, and things of that nature. So I've always kind of had that duality of two different fathers. Kind of not so much rich dad, poor dad kind of situation, but more so, detached dad versus, I'm going to teach you what it takes to be a man. So I always kind of had this duality going on. But the beautiful thing is because you went from basically having much to having nothing in a span of your elementary years. It developed a very deep-rooted hustle within me, because I decided that, because I started working at the age of 14. I was doing some work with my I don't like to call him stepfather, because I claim him as my father, as my second father.
There you go.
I like to refer to him in that way. He was a teacher. He was a professor at Texas Southern. So they didn't make a ton of money. My mom, was a school teacher. They didn't make a ton of money. Well,
they made a lot of difference in lives.
They did, and my mother's still doing that right now in Huffman, Texas, right now as an art teacher of all levels. My father passed 5 years ago, so there's a nice long list that goes along with that. But going back to kind of what ended up happening is I think right before I started high school, my father had ended up getting downsized at his job. So he had been at his job for almost 20 years. So all the skills, all the qualifications it took to be able to work a job back then, well, the process had changed. The hiring process had changed. The resume process had changed. And so he was actually out of work all through my high school years. And so I started working with him and with our landlord and things. I mean, I was paying expenses by the age of 15. So I understood understood how to go out and make what needs to happen from a hustle standpoint, from a financial standpoint. And that type of lesson has carried me on through today. I mean, you'll always see me with multiple streams of different opportunities to be able to make sure and ensure that I'm going to have what I need for myself, my family, and everybody else. And so that ended up really developing a real hardcore sense of responsibility very early on. And as we know, sometimes that can be a great thing, but also that can be there's always a downside to everything. And with that makes a lot of where you kind of get insulated in a bubble. You don't really accept help well. And so that was kind of one of the things that developed from there. But my home life was what it was, and we made it through it. Made it through high school. Was a pretty good athlete. Ended up earning a spot on a college roster some years later after multiple failures at the high school and college level, because I nearly didn't graduate because I was one of the proud dumb jocks from the late '90s. You remember those days? A lot of the NCAA rules. I remember was it Byron Hanspar from Texas Tech? Kind of ruined that for all of us as far as college athletes were saying. I'm not going to class. I'm not doing anything. So then there was rules in place. So I kind of followed in the dumb jock role through high school. Didn't care about really making good grades. Just wanted to make enough grades to be able to play. Just enough to be able to play. And that was obviously an erroneous way of thinking, but at the same time it taught a lot. But ended up leaving went to community college for 1 semester, transferred to Stephen F. Austin State, and like you heard in the story, I basically got dropped off with a TV, VCR, bag of clothes at $20, and a whole bunch of you better figure it out.
Yeah, go get it, man.
Yeah, so I developed that over time. I walked onto the football team while I was there. I started a company while I was in Stephen F. Austin. At fraternity, I did a ton of things while I was there. But I also was there quite a long time. I was there for 6.5 years. I flunked out several times. Made a lot of questionable decisions. But at the same time, it was what was needed and necessary for us to be able to push through and be what we are today, because now we take that mixed bag, we pull out our scars, we pull out all those different things, and it's what now we share in our current life. So I ended up graduating 6.5 years later, started with a newspaper down here in Northwest Houston. Actually, out in West Houston, I was working for the I-10 group. I covered sports in Spring Branch, I covered news in Katy, and I was actually making less than I was bartending in college. And so, once again, I was back on the hustle. So then it started getting to the point where it was like, all right, the job is for, at that time, rent. It was for rent and, this expenses. Okay, well, the hustle is for our car expenses. Like I started itemizing my life by the hustle. It's like, okay, I need I need $250 to take care of, at the time, my car note and insurance. So it's like, all right, what do I need to do? Okay, so now I'm gonna need to go get this outsource this magazine. Started doing all those different things, and so developed obviously had a love for writing, and basically all of that stuff ended up, culminating into where we are today. And it was just ended up being a whole mixed bag as far as where the life story is, and the beautiful thing is it's still being written at the current time, and we embrace all the changes
and the lessons and
all
that stuff.
Yeah, and it's and the beautiful thing is to not run from it, is to actually run to it.
Well said. That's just embrace it, understanding that hey, everybody has a story, everybody has things that happen to them, but like you said, you have to embrace it and learn from those lessons. And really, what that does is, that makes you a better person, down the road, because you see, hey, I'm not that. You talked about that go back moment. I'm not going back to that. Can't go back moment. I can't go back to that.
No, and that's for a lot of your the people who are going to be touched by this. There's always that idea that we've all come from somewhere. I mean, you think about it. Even if you come from a life of affluence, or come from a life of what we like to refer as privilege, where maybe dad's already, dad was first generation, so now you're the second generation coming in, and you're in finances is not what you have to worry about. Well, now what you have to worry about is the idea that now you need to put your trademark, your stamp on something. Because right now you just kind of been riding on the name. You've been riding on it's like now you have this idea that you want to be able to accomplish something. And, so there's that, you don't want to go back to the idea that people think that you're just, some silver spoon kid. And at the same time, if you come from, a place where it's a lot more difficult from a financial situation, or maybe the home life is not as stable as you would like it to be. Well, there's that, and like you said, when you sit back and maybe some of your people out there were those who, were on, government assistance, were on, bouncing around in foster homes. Maybe they were the ones who, raised by grandmother, raised by the aunt, moved here, moved there, bounced around a lot of things. Man, you start developing your own, and you start developing this buffer system. And yeah, there's some drawbacks to that, but at the same time, it's like, that drive to say, you know what, oh no, sir, I can't go back to that. Like I can't live like that any longer. I cannot muster the idea that is going to be. And so once you get to the point where you say, you know what, I can do something about my life.
Right.
I can do something about it today, right now. That's it.
And I'm going.
Because I ain't got no choice.
Right.
I don't have a choice. I do have a choice, but I don't, because that situation was far too painful for me. I can't do this anymore. So that's that's the can't go. That's the can't go back. The can't go back is that deep rooted. And you know what's crazy about that is that you can't manufacture that.
No.
You can't.
No, you can't. No, you're right. You have to live that. You have to go through and feel that pain and go through all of those emotions that you deal with, failures. Going from those different failures to learning. Like you said, hey, I had to get it. I had to make that plan to get it. My car, my rent. I got to get it.
And I know we're going to get into this more as we start going down the career path. But I was consulting with a gentleman, and he was doing well. A lot of my clients, their fathers do very well. A lot of them do. And the kid, there was a disconnect between him and the kid, and wanting to push for more. And he was like, Mom, I don't understand what's wrong with him. I was like, I can tell you what's wrong with him. I was like, it's too much new car smell, too much crown molding. Too many houses that cost over $350,000. Too much. I know what Dad has in the account. So when you don't have that
The fallback.
Well, that burn, that if this don't work, like he knows you got a college fund set up. So why is he gonna give the extra on the football field if stuff doesn't quite work out? Why is that young lady gonna give more on the volleyball court if she doesn't know? If she knows it, oh yeah, I don't know. I look around, I see what's going on. Mom makes this amount, Mom's $1.5 million, Dad's $10 million. What you got? You know that there's another opportunity for you. But that young man up the street, when you're going up 59 and you take that right at Laura Copy, you know where I'm going with this. Those kids back there is just like, man, if I don't do it, man, nobody in this house eats.
That's it.
You can't manufacture that. And just like I was saying with him, I was like, we have to find that place in between what drives him, what fuels him, and what he really wants out of life. I was like, 'cause right now he's skating. He's got the car with the Bluetooth. He's got the iPhone. He's got it all. He's got the allowance. He ain't paying for his own gas. He ain't got those kind of worries. So,
well, could you talk a little bit about your career and your career path? Up to where you are now.
Well, obviously, I've had a love for writing since the age of 12. So that's always kind of been my foundation, has been writing. Always loved writing. Was doing a lot of writing back in those days, and always worked for newspapers and different things like that. So that kind of set the foundation. I was actually working for a community newspaper back in New Caney while I was working with the Wingspan newspaper at New Caney High School. So that catapulted me into the college world, where I majored in journalism communication with a writing emphasis. And so I did that all through school. But the interesting thing is, towards the back end of high school, I was the editor of the newspaper, and I got that position pretty early on. I want to say end of sophomore year, maybe through junior. I think whoever the editor was at the time, he either left school or something ended up happening. So they took a couple of the writers and was just like, want to be editors. I was like, I ain't never done that before, but jumped into that. And so obviously you're assigning stories, you're writing stories. Well, what ended up happening is you send out writers and you send out photographers. And I noticed when I was sending out the writers were coming back with good material. Well, the photographers weren't. So then I basically taught myself how to use a camera. Ended up doing that, and that actually catapulted me into having the writing side of it. I actually took more photography classes through college, and started a photography company in college, which was part of the hustle.
The hustle.
Yeah, I mean, I had to figure something out, and so a woman I worked with at the time had an old, I think it was an old Canon or an old Olympus camera. I can't remember which one it was. I had to go back and pull it because I ended up buying a lot of older cameras. And so it was one of those old school. You still gotta, this was back when you still had to get in the dark room. You still had to go take film in and get them to process it. And they're doing a little machine. The film is sliding down with the strips. I mean, this was those days. I mean, goodness, that seems like so long ago. But that's I did a lot of that, and so I was I did the photography. Started AV photography when I was 20 years old. Got me a DBA. Started selling photos on campus, and so that put some things into perspective. Like I said, got out of school, went and started working for the newspaper down here. It was at the time it was the Spring Branch Sun and the Katy Sun, the I-10 group through Houston Community Newspapers, which has now been bought out by the Examiner newspapers all over the largest chain of community newspapers, I believe, in the state, maybe even in the country. Worked for that company for a year. Ran into a couple during my coverage of Memorial, Springwood, Stratford, and Northbrook. So I was working with Spring Branch. But there was a family from Memorial who really took a liking to my writing. And I ended up connecting with them and sharing some intellect with them. Well, they ended up starting a company called College Ball or Bust, which was an online recruiting service using my intellect from working with that working with so many athletes, and my intellect of the football recruiting process. So I ended up working for that company. I believe I did 5 years with that company. It was a startup, and through that we ended up starting an online newspaper called The Athletes Connection, which was a huge deal because we were like one of the first newspapers to really start streaming video online. It was very digital. It was very cutting edge, and that was around the boom. I want to say that would have been around, I started with them in 2005. I think that 2008 time was when all the high school newspapers kind of started booming. You had the Chronicle busting out with online newspapers and videos. So high school sports was at a real high right now. Well, we were part of that boom, and I was kind of driving a bus for the Athletes Connection. Had quite a few clients across the state and across the city, and was doing a lot of that work. And so that really catapulted me in that regard. That was about a 5 to 7 year pool, and during that time I actually ended up signing on with at the time was Rivals.com. But then I was with Rivals for all of about 6 to 8 months, and then the leader of the Texas version of Rivals ended up signing on with Scout, and so he was like, "Hey, I'm going over to Scout. They're trying to give me a new contract. You want to come with me?" Yeah, I don't know nobody else. So I ended up moving over to Scout. And interesting thing is, like, I really, really was kind of enamored with that work. And so I started just doing it, covering like recruits all over the place. And I was like, hey man, how do I earn doing this? Because I mean, I worked for those organizations for about a year for free. Just one, because I was so engulfed, I was so obsessed with that type of work. And then it started getting to where he's like, well, if you want to get noticed, start doing more content. He's like, and I'll pay you $100 a month. So I was doing like, oh my God, like 10 articles a week for $100 a month, which is crazy because it was just like, what I thought at the time was that's what you needed to do to get noticed. But in actuality, what I was doing is I was doing the articles that he was supposed to be doing, that he was putting credit on his own ticket, which is all good because what ended up happening is like I was going through and I was just like, how can you earn more of this? And then it got notice of a gentleman at the time who was out of Oklahoma, who was like, who's this guy, Ahmard Vital, down here, who seems like he's putting out a lot of work. And so he was like, hey, I'm going to connect you with this guy named Greg Powers. He's going to give you a little bit of work too. And so Greg was like, man, I'll pay you $100 to do some of this work. And so now I'm like, okay, $100 here, $100. So now I'm up to $200, and I'm cranking. And then he was just like, and I remember Greg at the time was like, why are you staying so local? And I was like, I don't know anything else. And so he expanded me out. Next thing you know, it went from that to getting a contract working with him, covering other schools within the Big 12. From that, it catapulted into me being the #1 beat writer for the University of Oklahoma for Scout.com, and then that's when I got noticed from the people at the higher ups. The VP of Fox invited me down to come help with coverage of the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio. Said they wanted to meet. Okay, so I'm coming down there. They're seeing what I'm doing. Like, we have no clue who you are. And the interesting thing was, they weren't looking for a writer in Houston. They were looking for a writer in Dallas. But they were just like, we can't pass up a dude who goes this hard. Right. And so that kind of set the tone for all of those things. And I ended up meeting with the VP of Fox, and he was like, what if we offered you a contract for $500? Whoa.
Yeah, where do I sign?
And so, I'm down there, we're down here, and then when we cover these All-American games, you got to understand we're bringing in people from all over the country. So, our Pittsburgh guys coming down, our Seattle guys coming down, our Michigan guys coming down. And so we're all down there. And so, we're seeing the thing. He's like, just kind of hang around and just be here with us and kind of see the flow. Well, I'm not going to hang around and see the kind of flow. So I'm looking at the guys, and I'm like, hey, what are we doing? So we're at the combine, and everybody's kind of moving around or whatever, kind of doing their stuff. I was like, hey, what can I do to help? Those words is what set everything in motion. They was like, well, just kind of go down and mingle with the people in the audience and just kind of see what's going on. I went down there. There was 2 sessions. There was a morning session and an afternoon session. I went down there. I'm bringing back notes. I'm bringing back phone numbers. I'm bringing back videos. I'm coming back with all kinds of things. So I ended up starting a notebook of notes from the stands at the Army All-American Bowl. So much to the point where that became a thing, part of the network. So every year when I came down, it was like, okay, now go take the ladies that. So I would take other workers with me and be like, we'll pan the whole room, and we'll all come back with notes and then share all of those notes from there. So all the guys from these other parts of the country who were like managers in their own right everywhere else was like, man, who is this guy? Who's this guy? What's he doing? And so then the game happens, and I was just like, hey, what can I do to fill in? Hey, we need a couple of commitment stories. One kid going to Florida. I think the other kid went to Virginia or something like that. It didn't matter. I was like, let me get down there in the mix. So I went down there, boom, got the interviews, got the story up there. It was like, where's the story? It's already loaded on the site. What else you need? And so then it was just like, hey man, Joe, we gotta get this guy down here every year. And so then that set the precedent. So 5 double down, double down, double down. That's what it ended up turning into. So then I ended up becoming a monster in that world between that and working with the University of Oklahoma, which made me global because Oklahoma, that was around the same time when Oklahoma wasn't just recruiting Texas. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma started going to the West Coast, started going out to Nevada, started going out to California, and started going all these different places. So now I'm calling kids from all over the place, and now I'm building my brand all over the country. And so then it was just a wrap, and ended up working with 4 different newspapers on the network, ended up working for about 10, 12, 15 different sites. I was the national recruiting analyst for the state of Texas for almost a dozen years. I recently just left just now. And of course, during that time, I've always kind of kept a day job or whatever, but at the same time, from a career standpoint, in 2011, I wrote my first book, Awaken the Baller Within, which was a result of all of those interviews. All that time I was connecting with all those athletes, I saw that there was a common denominator between the way they spoke and the results on the field. It wasn't physical. And I started realizing that through time, that hey, what's the difference between this and this? And at that time, I also had my own emotional issues going on. I had been in a relationship that I went, all in on, put all my chips on the table for that one, and all my chips got took. Yeah. And so I went through which was about as close to a nervous breakdown as possible, and I didn't know where to turn. And I had a guy whom I worked with at the time, and he slipped me this DVD. That DVD was The Secret. And so he was like, just watch it. So I was like, what is it? He's like, just go home and watch it. So I'm watching, I'm just like, oh, okay, thoughts are things. okay, what you believe you can conceive.
Yeah.
What? And so they're going through it, and so I'm finding people I'm connecting with. At that time, Michael Bernard Beckwith, John D. Martini, who's now a colleague of mine now. Marcy Scheinhoff, Jack Canfield, and I'm just like, so what I started doing, I started seeing all the people who were in the movie, and I started looking at them individually, like, hey, let me get a little bit more of that, get a little bit more of that, and so then it developed this personal and spiritual development thing in me, and at the same time, I had actually met, through that relationship that nearly ruined me, I met a gentleman named Arthur J. Johnson, who's a peak performance coach here in Houston, Texas, and he became a mentor, which now we're colleagues, partners, and brothers in this thing, which he still mentors me as well. And he showed me the spiritual development side. He showed me the personal development side. Started holding me accountable for what I'm doing. When we talked, and still to this day, like we don't discuss excuses, we discuss solutions. And so that developed, this personal development, spiritual development side of me. But here's the issue: I'm still a sports dude, right? So it's like I still got this love of sport. So it's like, how can I merge the two? So then I went on a quest like Napoleon Hill did, and I started interviewing top athletes and understanding the mental capacity, the mental attitude of a high-end athlete. And that's where Awaken the Baller Within came from. And from there, it was like, hey, if you want to learn how to promote your book, you need to speak. Okay. I'll try that out. And I remember the first time I went and spoke, my same partner had a spiritual experience. Used to happen on Tuesday. It was called Transformation Tuesday. And he had an affirmation. And the affirmation was awesome. And I was like, man, this is great. And so I called him one day and I was like, hey, this is the way I feel about this affirmation. He's like, why don't you tell the people that, why don't you stand up in the middle of my presentation after we get done with it and tell them your take on the affirmation. So I get up, sharing with people, breaking this down and just telling it. And like the people were just like, whoa. And he was like, so is there more? But no, that was it. And so my guy was like, you maybe should come back next week and try that again. Like it was great. It was a great addition to the experience. Well, one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I'm opening up the experience on the first 15, 20 minutes of the experience. So now, leading him into his time, I'm opening up the experience. And that experience was a personal development one. It evolved into a spiritual development one. It was meeting on Sundays. And so then it just came from there. And then next thing you know, I did my first paid keynote in Tyler, Texas, on a park bench to 2 kids and 8 coaches. And I look back at that day and it's like I gave everything to that moment and there wasn't but 2 kids in the room. It wasn't but 2 kids on the park bench. No feedback. Had my little talk, I was probably just as raw as could be. But that moment, I actually was in Tyler not long ago. And I looked at them and I was looking for that park. And I'm like, this is where it started. This is where I got the first check to say, you're gonna come speak to some guys. So now I look out into the room and I'm just like, there it is. This is where it started. So now we are where we are, working on more books, working on more programs. As you can see, we're doing, yes, all of that, man. And it's just like, we're just getting started with this thing. Like, it's literally just getting started. Like, I wake up every morning and say, you know what, you ain't done nothing yet.
There you go.
And so that just develops this hunger. It's almost like I still got that TV VCR and $20 because I can't go back. You know what I can't go back to? What I made last year. Yeah. Whatever that looks like. Yeah, I'm grateful for it, but we weren't created just to have just enough. It's time to expand and go on to the next level.